I was sorting through mail when my phone buzzed with a text from my son Jake. "Mom, the lawyer called. Dad left you the old garage on Industrial Avenue." "That's it. I got the penthouse and investments. Maybe you can live there since you have nowhere else to go." He didn't even call to tell me personally. 42 years I spent supporting his father's business, raising Jake, building our family. The lawyer's office sent official papers that afternoon. Everything confirmed in black and white. I took a deep breath, but I smiled because there was something Jake didn't know about his father, something Robert had shared with me during those quiet evening walks 6 years ago when the doctors first mentioned his heart condition. I folded the papers carefully and slipped them into my purse. That weekend, I would drive to Industrial Avenue for the first time, not because I had to, but because I was finally ready to see what Robert had really left behind. My name is Susan, and this is the story of how my husband's greatest act of love came disguised as abandonment. That Saturday morning arrives gray and overcast, matching the heaviness in my chest as I drive toward Industrial Avenue. The papers from the lawyer's office sit folded in my purse, along with the garage key they'd given me. 42 years of marriage, and this is what Robert left me, or so I thought. The address leads me to a rundown industrial district I've never visited before. Warehouses and auto shops line both sides of the street, most showing their age with peeling paint and rusted chain-link fences. I park in front of Unit 1420, a single-story concrete building with a faded blue garage door. The lock looks newer than everything else around it, which strikes me as odd. My hands shake slightly as I insert the key. The mechanism turns smoothly, and I raise the door with some effort. The metal groans on its tracks, letting in the morning light gradually. What I see stops me cold. 3 cars sit under canvas covers in the dim space. Not just any cars. Even covered, their elegant silhouettes are unmistakable. Classic lines that speak of craftsmanship from decades past. The garage itself is immaculate, not the dusty abandoned space I'd expected. The concrete floor gleams, and tools hang neatly organized on pegboards along the walls. I step inside and walk toward the first car. My footsteps echo in the silence. When I pull back the canvas cover, I gasp. A pristine silver Aston Martin sits before me, its paint reflecting the overhead fluorescent lights like a mirror. The DB5 badge on the trunk tells me this is no ordinary car. I've seen these in movies, in magazines featuring million-dollar auctions. The second cover reveals a stunning red Ferrari with curves that flow like liquid metal. The 275 GTB4 emblem catches my eye. My knowledge of cars is limited, but even I recognize the prancing horse logo and the way this machine seems poised to leap forward even while stationary. The third car takes my breath away entirely. A Mercedes-Benz with doors that open upward like wings. The gull wing design is iconic, something I remember from old Hollywood films. The silver paint job matches the Aston Martin, and together they create a scene that belongs in a museum, not a garage in an industrial neighborhood. I walk around each car slowly, running my fingers along their perfect surfaces. Not a scratch or dent anywhere. The leather interiors are pristine, the chrome gleaming. These aren't abandoned relics. They're treasures, maintained with obvious care and love. But it's what I find next that changes everything. A small office area in the corner of the garage contains a desk with a single manila envelope marked for Susan. My name in Robert's handwriting sends a chill through me. Inside, I find documents that make my head spin. Certificates of authenticity for each vehicle, insurance appraisals dated just 6 months ago, and a number that makes me sink into the desk chair. $12 million. $12 million. The garage Jake dismissed so cruelly contains $12 million worth of classic automobiles. But there's more. Much more. A letter in Robert's careful script explains everything. And as I read, tears stream down my face. "My dearest Susan," it begins. "If you're reading this, then I'm gone. and you've discovered the first surprise I left for you. But this is only the beginning. He goes on to explain that 6 years ago, after his heart diagnosis, he began planning for my future, not just financially, but emotionally. He knew Jake's character better than I wanted to admit. He saw the entitlement, the callousness that I'd made excuses for over the years. The letter reveals that Robert had been transferring assets into my name for years. Not just the cars, but properties across the country. A house in Playa del Carmen, Mexico, decorated exactly to my taste. A vineyard in California's wine country. Investment accounts and trust funds that Jake never knew existed. All of it protected from probate. All of it legally mine. I couldn't split everything equally, Robert writes, because Jake would have found a way to control your share too. This way, you have independence. You have power. You have choices. The wisdom in those words hits me like a physical blow. My husband saw what I refused to see, that our son had become someone who would exploit even his own mother's grief. The letter includes detailed instructions, contact information for lawyers in 3 different states, account numbers for banks I'd never heard of, property addresses, and key locations. There's even a USB drive containing financial records and property deeds. Robert had thought of everything, but it's the final paragraph that breaks me completely. I know this will seem like deception, Susan, but I preferred to let Jake think he was, getting everything rather than fight him in court while I was dying. I wanted my last months with you to be about love, not legal battles. Jake made his choices over the years. These are the consequences. Take care of yourself first, darling. Take care of yourself, and if Jake ever truly changes, then you can decide whether to help him. But the power will always be yours. I sit in that garage office for 2 hours, reading and rereading everything. The magnitude of what Robert did overwhelmed me. He didn't just leave me financially secure. He orchestrated my freedom from a toxic family dynamic I'd been trapped in for years. The next step requires courage I'm not sure I possess. The letter mentions Playa del Carmen specifically, suggesting I visit the house there as soon as possible. It includes contact information for a neighbor named Maria del Carmen, whom Robert describes as a trusted friend who's been waiting to meet me. I lock the garage carefully and drive home to pack. Jake's penthouse feels different now that I know the truth. His expensive furniture and artwork seem gaudy rather than impressive. The space feels cold and unwelcoming, which I suppose it always was. I just trained myself not to notice. Jake finds me packing in what used to be my bedroom. "Where do you think you're going?" he demands, standing in the doorway with his arms crossed. His voice carries that tone of ownership I've heard so often lately. "I'm taking a trip," I tell him calmly, folding clothes into my suitcase. "To see what else your father left me." "What else?" "Mom, you got a garage. That's it. Don't start imagining things because you're upset." I look at him directly for the first time in days. Really look at him. When did my son become this stranger with cold eyes and a cruel mouth? When did he stop seeing me as his mother and start seeing me as an obstacle to his comfort? "Jake," I say quietly, "you don't know everything your father planned. You might want to be nicer to me." He laughs, but it sounds forced. "Are you threatening me?" "With what?" "You have nothing." "I have exactly what your father intended me to have." I close the suitcase and wheel it toward the door. "And he intended me to have choices." Jake follows me to the front door, his voice rising. "You can't just leave. This is your home. We need to talk about the future, about arrangements." "No, Jake. You need to talk about arrangements. I need to discover what Robert left me." I open the door and step into the hallway. "Take care of yourself. I'll be in touch when I'm ready." The flight to Mexico gives me time to process everything. I stare out the window at clouds and ocean, thinking about the woman I was yesterday versus the woman I'm becoming today. Yesterday, I was a widow, dependent on her son's grudging charity. Today, I'm a woman with resources and options I never dreamed possible. Maria del Carmen meets me at the airport in Playa del Carmen, holding a sign with my name. She's about my age, with silver hair and warm brown eyes that crinkle when she smiles. She embraces me like an old friend, though we've never met. Susan. Finally, Robert told me so much about you. I've been looking forward to this day for years. Her English carries a slight accent but flows easily. Come, let me show you your house. The drive through Playa del Carmen reveals a town that balances Mexican culture with international influence. Colorful buildings line clean streets, and the scent of ocean salt mingles with flowers and food from outdoor restaurants. It's beautiful and welcoming in a way that makes my chest loosen for the first time in weeks. The house sits on a quiet street, just 4 blocks from the beach. It's a single-story Spanish colonial style, with white stucco walls and red tile roof. Bougainvillea cascades over the front wall in brilliant purple blooms. Maria produces a key from her purse and opens the wooden gate. Robert had the gardener maintain everything, she explains, as we walk through a courtyard filled with tropical plants. He wanted it perfect for when you arrived. She unlocks the front door and steps aside to let me enter first. What I see takes my breath away again. The living room is decorated exactly as I would have done it myself. Soft blues and whites, comfortable furniture that invites relaxation rather than shows off wealth. Books line built-in shelves, and I recognize many titles from my own wish list. But it's the painting above the fireplace that makes me cry. A watercolor of Venice's Grand Canal, painted in soft pastels. It's identical to one I admired in a gallery 30 years ago during our anniversary trip to Italy. I'd mentioned loving it to Robert, but the price was beyond our budget then. Somehow, he remembered and found one just like it. He commissioned that from a local artist, Maria says softly. He showed her a photograph and described how much you loved Venice. It took her 3 tries to get the colors exactly right. I walk through the house in amazement. The master bedroom overlooks a private garden with a fountain. The kitchen contains top-quality appliances but maintains a cozy feeling with hand-painted tiles and copper accents. There's even a small library with a reading nook facing the garden. Maria, I say, sitting down heavily on the living room sofa, how long did Robert plan this? He bought the house 4 years ago, she admits, but he's been talking about you for 6 years. Every time he visited, he would walk through and make notes about what to change. He wanted everything to reflect your personality, not his. That evening, Maria takes me to dinner at a beachfront restaurant. Over fresh seafood and local wine, she tells me more about Robert's visits, how he would spend hours choosing paint colors and furniture, how he interviewed contractors and decorators to ensure they understood his vision, how he practiced conversations in Spanish so he could communicate better with the local workers. He loved you so much, Maria says, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. But he was also very worried about your son. He said Jake had become someone who saw people as assets rather than family. The truth in those words stings because I've known it for years but refuse to acknowledge it. Jake stopped seeing me as his mother long ago. I became a convenience, someone to manage his father's care while he pursued his own interests, someone to cook and clean and organize while he focused on his business deals and social life. Robert was protecting you, Maria continues, but he was also giving you power. He said you deserved choices after 42 years of putting everyone else first. Back at the house that night, I sit in the garden with a cup of tea and Robert's letter. Reading it again under stars I've never seen from any other location, I begin to understand the full scope of what my husband accomplished. He didn't just provide financial security. He created a new life for me, complete with a home and a friend and opportunities I never imagined. But there's practical work to be done. The next morning, I call the lawyers Robert mentioned in his letter. The conversation with James Morrison, the estate attorney in Los Angeles, clarifies the legal situation. Mrs. Torres, he explains, Your husband was remarkably thorough. All assets transferred to you are completely separate from his probated estate. Your son cannot contest them because they were never technically part of the inheritance he received. The numbers he recites stagger me. Beyond the cars and the Mexico house, there's a California vineyard producing modest but steady profits, investment accounts worth nearly $3 million, a condo in Monterey that generates rental income, properties I never knew existed, all legally mine. What do I need to do? I ask, feeling overwhelmed by the responsibility. Very little, actually. Robert set up management systems for everything. The vineyard has a management company. The rental properties have maintenance services. The investment accounts have advisory services. You can be as hands-on or hands-off as you prefer. Over the next few days, I tour the Monterey condo with a local property manager. It's a modern space in an upscale neighborhood, currently rented to a professional couple who've never missed a payment. The monthly income alone exceeds what I used to spend on groceries and household expenses combined. The vineyard requires a flight to California, where I meet with Elena Rodriguez, the management company representative. The property spans 40 acres in Napa Valley, with rows of healthy grapevines stretching toward distant mountains. The main house is modest but charming, and the business generates enough profit to pay its own expenses, plus a small distribution to me. Your husband visited twice a year, Elena explains as we walk between the vine rows. He never interfered with operations, but he learned everything about wine production. He said he wanted to understand every investment he was making for you. The depth of Robert's planning becomes more apparent with each discovery. He hadn't just bought properties randomly. He'd researched markets, interviewed managers, and created systems that would function smoothly without requiring expertise I didn't possess. Every choice reflected careful consideration of what would be best for me specifically. But Jake isn't content to let me disappear quietly. 3 weeks into my stay in Mexico, Maria brings me my phone during breakfast. Someone named Clara called twice this morning. She says it's urgent regarding your son. Clara Mendoza turns out to be Jake's business assistant, a young woman with a professional demeanor that barely conceals her desperation. Mrs. Torres, I'm calling because Jake is in serious trouble. He needs your help, but he's too proud to ask directly. What kind of trouble? I ask, though I'm not sure I want to know. Financial trouble. The investment he made with most of his inheritance, it didn't go well. The land he bought for development has environmental contamination issues. The cleanup costs are massive, and he can't sell it. He's taken loans against the penthouse to cover the losses, and now those are coming due. The irony isn't lost on me. Jake dismissed the garage as worthless while investing millions in contaminated land. But I keep my voice neutral. What does he want from me? He thinks maybe your father-in-law left other assets that weren't mentioned in the will, things that might help cover his debts. Clara's voice drops. Mrs. Torres, I've seen the numbers. Without help, he could lose everything. I tell Clara I'll consider the situation and call back within a week. After hanging up, I sit in my Mexican garden and think about karma. Jake treated me as disposable, assuming I had no value beyond serving his needs. Now he needs something from me, but he still doesn't know what I actually possess. The decision to return to the States comes after long conversations with Maria and my new team of legal advisors. I'm not going back to rescue Jake. I'm going back to understand exactly what he's facing and decide if there's an opportunity for him to learn from his mistakes. The flight to Los Angeles gives me time to plan my approach. I won't reveal the full extent of my assets, but I will investigate his situation thoroughly. If Jake has truly learned humility, if he's genuinely changed, then perhaps there's a path forward. But any help will come with conditions and boundaries. Los Angeles feels alien after weeks in Mexico's warmth and color. The city's concrete and glass seem cold and unwelcoming. I check into a hotel rather than staying with Jake, which establishes my independence from the start. Clara meets me in the hotel lobby the next morning. She's younger than I expected, maybe 30, with tired eyes that suggest she's been carrying too much stress for too long. Over coffee, she explains Jake's situation in detail. The land purchase seemed perfect initially, she begins. 70 acres outside the city, zoned for residential development. Jake planned to build luxury condos and make a significant profit, but the environmental assessment revealed contamination from an old manufacturing plant. The cleanup will cost more than the land is worth. The numbers she shows me are sobering. Jake invested $8 million of his inheritance in the land purchase. The environmental remediation will cost another $12 million minimum. He's borrowed $6 million against the penthouse to cover initial expenses and interest payments. Now he owes $20 million total, but owns assets worth maybe $5 million. Why didn't he do environmental testing before buying? I ask, though I suspect I know the answer. Clara looks uncomfortable. He was in a hurry to close the deal. Another buyer was interested, and Jake didn't want to lose the opportunity. The seller offered a discount for a quick sale with minimal inspections. Greed and impatience, the same character flaws that led Jake to treat his own mother callously. He wanted everything immediately and was willing to cut corners to get it. The contaminated land is simply the natural consequence of his approach to life. Where is Jake now? I ask. At the penthouse mostly. He's been struggling since the full scope of the problem became clear. He hasn't been going to his office much. I decide to see the penthouse situation myself before making any decisions. Clara drives me there, and the building looks the same from the outside. But Jake's unit tells a different story. The front door opens to reveal chaos. Half the walls have been torn down for renovation that clearly stopped abruptly. Construction materials sit in piles covered with dust. The kitchen has been gutted, but not rebuilt. Exposed wiring hangs from ceiling fixtures that were never installed. Jake emerges from what used to be his bedroom, and I barely recognize him. He's lost weight and looks older than his 45 years. His clothes are wrinkled, and his usually perfect hair is disheveled. He stares at me for a long moment before speaking. "Mom, Clara said you were coming, but I wasn't sure you'd actually show up." "I'm here," I say simply, looking around at the destruction. "What happened to your beautiful penthouse?" "I started renovating to increase its value," he admits, not meeting my eyes. "But when the land deal went bad, I had to stop paying the contractors. They walked off the job and took some of their materials with them. The space feels like a metaphor for Jake's life. Expensive but hollow, torn apart by poor decisions and abandoned half-finished. I walk through the room slowly, noting the damage and waste. "Jake," I say finally, "we need to talk honestly. About everything. If you're here to lecture me about poor choices, don't bother. I know I messed up." His voice carries defensive anger, but it's weaker than before, more desperate than entitled. "I'm not here to lecture. I'm here to understand if you've actually learned anything from this experience." We sit in the only furnished room left, his home office. The desk and chairs survived the renovation chaos, though they're covered with financial documents and legal papers. Jake pours himself a drink, even though it's barely noon, which tells me more about his state of mind. "What do you want to understand?" he asks. "I want to understand if you recognize how you've treated people, especially me, over the past few years. I want to know if you see the connection between your character and your current situation." Jake stares into his glass for a long time. When he looks up, his eyes are different, less defiant, more vulnerable. "You mean how I kicked you out of your own home after Dad died? That's part of it. And how I assumed you were weak and helpless and would just accept whatever scraps I threw you." His voice gets quieter. "And how I never once asked what you needed or wanted during the worst time of your life." The admission surprises me, not because Jake is capable of insight, but because he's finally willing to voice it. Go on. I treated you like a burden instead of my mother. I acted like everything Dad built belonged to me automatically, like you were just in the way. He sets down his glass and looks directly at me. I was wrong. About all of it. Why were you wrong, Jake? Because you gave 42 years of your life to Dad and to me. You earned respect and security and love, and instead, I gave you coldness and rejection. He pauses. And because Dad was smarter than I gave him credit for. That last comment catches my attention. What do you mean? I mean, I don't think that garage was the only thing he left you, was it? Jake's voice carries a new understanding. Dad knew exactly what kind of person I'd become. He knew I'd try to control everything, including you, so he found a way to protect you from me. I don't confirm or deny his suspicion, but I nod slightly. Your father loved both of us, but he loved me enough to ensure I'd have choices. And I've lost everything because I assumed I could take shortcuts and manipulate people without consequences. Jake stands up and walks to the window. The land deal failed because I was too arrogant to do proper inspections. The penthouse is destroyed because I tried to renovate it with money I didn't actually have. And I lost my mother because I treated her like she was disposable. The conversation continues for 2 hours. Jake tells me about the mounting debts, the legal pressures, the sleepless nights worrying about bankruptcy. But more importantly, he talks about the loneliness, about realizing that his friends were attracted to his money and status, not to him as a person, about understanding that he'd driven away the people who actually cared about him. What do you want from me, Jake? I ask finally. He starts, then stops. I want to say I want you to save me financially. But that's the old me talking. The real answer is that I want a chance to earn back your respect. And if that means losing everything I have, then maybe that's what I deserve. His honesty moves me, though I remain cautious. Words are easy. Changed behavior is difficult. If I were to consider helping you, it would come with conditions. Serious ones. What kind of conditions? Complete financial transparency, professional oversight of any assistance, and personal accountability for the changes you claim you want to make. I stand up to leave. But first, I need to see if you're serious about this transformation, or if you're just desperate enough to say anything. I give Jake 2 weeks to think about my conditions while I return to Mexico. The time away provides perspective and allows me to consult with my legal team about the best approach if I decide to help him. Maria listens to my account of the Los Angeles visit while we walk along the beach one evening. What does your heart tell you? She asks. My heart wants to believe Jake can change, but my head knows that people don't usually transform just because they face consequences. They transform when they truly understand how their actions hurt others. And has he reached that understanding? Maybe. He said the right words. But I need to see actions over time. The answer comes in an unexpected phone call a week later. Jake calls me directly, not through Clara, and his voice sounds clearer than it had in Los Angeles. Mom, I've been thinking about what you said, about conditions and accountability. I want to accept whatever terms you set, but I also want to tell you what I've started doing on my own. What do you mean? I contacted a therapist. Dr. Patricia Williams. I've had 3 sessions already, and she's helping me understand how I became someone I don't actually like. He pauses. And I called a bankruptcy attorney to understand all my options. I want to know the worst-case scenario before I ask for help. Those actions impress me more than his words in Los Angeles had. Seeking therapy shows willingness to examine his character. Consulting a bankruptcy attorney shows he's not just assuming I'll rescue him without consequences. I also did something else, Jake continues. I went back to the contaminated land with an environmental consultant. Not to figure out how to develop it, but to understand if there's a way to clean it up properly and then donate it for affordable housing or a park. Something that would benefit people instead of just generating profit for me. That development intrigues me greatly. Jake is thinking beyond his own financial recovery to consider how his mistakes might be transformed into something beneficial for others. It suggests a fundamental shift in perspective. Why would you donate land instead of trying to recover your investment? I ask. Because I'm starting to understand that my problems aren't really about money. They're about character, and maybe fixing the character is more important than fixing the finances. After that conversation, I make my decision. But I also make a plan that will test Jake's sincerity while protecting both of us from future disappointments. I returned to Los Angeles 2 weeks later with a comprehensive proposal drafted by my legal team. Jake meets me at the hotel, and this time, he looks more like his old self. Clean clothes, neat appearance, alert eyes. The changes suggest he's taking better care of himself. Before we discuss any help, I begin, I need to show you something your father wanted you to see. From my briefcase, I pull out a manila folder containing documents Robert had prepared years ago. Environmental reports on the exact piece of land Jake had purchased. Detailed analyses showing contamination risks and cleanup costs. Financial projections demonstrating why the property was a poor investment at any price. Jake reads through the papers with growing amazement. Dad knew about this specific land? Your father researched every major property deal in the region. He thought you might target that land because of its size and zoning. He prepared these reports to show you if you ever asked his advice. I pause. But you never asked his advice about anything. The weight of that truth settles over Jake's face. He tried to protect me from my own mistakes. He tried to guide you, but guidance only works if someone is willing to receive it. I hand Jake a second folder containing my conditions for providing assistance. The terms are strict but fair. All financial help will be managed through a trust controlled by professional advisors. Jake will have input but not control. Any assistance must be earned through demonstrated progress in therapy and community service. The help will be structured as loans with reasonable interest rates, not gifts. The total assistance available is $2 million, I explain. Enough to prevent bankruptcy and provide a foundation for rebuilding, but not enough to return to your old lifestyle. Jake reads through the terms carefully. The amount is much less than his debts, which means he'll have to make difficult choices about what to keep and what to lose. The conditions require ongoing accountability and genuine personal change. It's help, but not rescue. What would you do with $2 million? I ask. Pay off the most pressing debts. Finish the penthouse renovation with modest materials instead of luxury ones. Sell it and use the proceeds to cover more debts and start over with something smaller. He looks up. And fund the environmental cleanup of the land so I can donate it responsibly. That's a lot of responsibility for $2 million. It's not about the money covering everything, Jake says. It's about the money buying me time to earn the rest through honest work. I can't expect to maintain the same lifestyle I had before. I need to build something more sustainable. His answer demonstrates the mindset shift I've been hoping to see. Jake is thinking about earning rather than inheriting, about sustainability rather than quick profits, about responsibility rather than entitlement. I agree to the terms, and we spend the next month working with lawyers and financial advisors to structure the assistance properly. The process is complicated but necessary to ensure everything is done legally and transparently. The results exceed my expectations. Jake uses the first installment of funds to address his most urgent debts, which relieves immediate pressure and gives him room to think clearly. He continues therapy weekly and begins volunteering with a nonprofit organization focused on affordable housing development. The penthouse renovation takes 4 months, with Jake doing much of the work himself alongside hired contractors. The result is elegant but not ostentatious, comfortable but not extravagant. When it sells, the proceeds cover most of his remaining debts, More importantly, Jake's work with the housing nonprofit leads to a job offer. The organization needs someone with real estate development experience to manage a project converting abandoned lots into affordable housing. The salary is modest compared to his previous income, but it's steady and meaningful work. 9 months after our confrontation in Los Angeles, Jake visits me in Playa del Carmen. He looks healthier and happier than I've seen him in years. The stress lines around his eyes have softened, and he moves with more energy and purpose. "I brought you something," he says, handing me a small wooden box. Inside, I find Robert's original wedding ring and a second ring I've never seen before. It's a simple band with small diamonds, elegant and timeless. "Dad had that made for you about 6 months before he died," Jake explains. "It's an eternity ring. He called it his promise that love continues even when life doesn't." Tears fill my eyes as I slip the ring onto my finger. It fits perfectly, of course. Robert would have remembered my ring size from 42 years of marriage. "He gave me the box before he died and made me promise to give it to you when I was worthy of handling something so precious," Jake continues. "I didn't understand what he meant then. And now you do? Now I understand that being worthy means respecting the people who love you, not taking them for granted." Jake sits beside me on the garden bench. He knew I wasn't ready to appreciate what really mattered. He knew I had to lose everything false before I could value anything real. We talk long into the evening about his new life, his work, his therapy progress. Jake tells me about the affordable housing project, about families who will have homes because of work he's helping coordinate. The satisfaction in his voice when he describes this work is something I never heard when he talked about his previous business deals. "What about the contaminated land?" I ask. "The cleanup is almost finished. Once it's complete, we're donating it to the city for a public park with affordable housing around the perimeter. It'll serve families who need homes instead of wealthy people who want luxury." He smiles. "It feels better than any profit I ever made." The transformation seems genuine and lasting. Jake has rebuilt his life on a foundation of service rather than accumulation, contribution rather than extraction. He's become the man Robert and I always hoped he could be, though it took losing everything for him to find that person. On his last day in Mexico, Jake and I drive to the beach for a final conversation. As we walk along the shore, he asks about my own future plans. "I'm thinking of staying here permanently," I tell him. "This house feels more like home than anywhere I've lived in years. Maria has become a dear friend, and I love the pace of life here." "What about the cars? The other properties?" "I've been considering that question for months. I'm keeping the Aston Martin. It reminds me of your father's thoughtfulness and the adventures he wanted us to share. But I'm selling the other 2 cars. For the money? For the purpose. I'm starting a foundation focused on educational opportunities for women over 50, women who want to begin new careers or pursue dreams they postponed while raising families. I pause to watch pelicans diving for fish in the surf. And I'm setting up trust funds for any grandchildren you might give me someday." Jake laughs. "I'd have to find someone willing to marry a reformed real estate developer with a modest salary first. The right person will appreciate who you've become, not who you used to be." As we drive back toward town, I reflect on the strange journey that brought us here. A year ago, I was a dependent widow dismissed by her own son. Today, I'm an independent woman with resources, purpose, and a restored relationship with Jake. The garage that seemed like such an insult has become the foundation of my liberation. Robert's secret sanctuary didn't just provide financial security, it provided proof of love, evidence of foresight, and the tools for transformation. Not just my transformation, but Jake's as well. That evening, as Jake prepares to return to Los Angeles and his new life, he thanks me again for the help I provided. "You could have left me to face the consequences alone," he says. "I deserved that." "Maybe," I agree. But your father believed in second chances when they're truly earned. You earned yours. After he leaves, I sit in my garden with a glass of wine and Robert's letters. Both rings shine on my finger in the lamplight. The original wedding band represents the love we shared for 42 years. The eternity ring represents the love that continues beyond death, expressed through foresight, protection, and hope. Tomorrow, I'll drive the Aston Martin to the beach and walk along the shore. I'll call the foundation lawyers and finalize plans for the educational programs. I'll have lunch with Maria and discuss the book club she wants to start for expat women. These are not the activities of a discarded widow dependent on her son's charity. These are the choices of a woman with power, purpose, and possibility. A woman who discovered that her husband's greatest gift was not just financial security, but the freedom to become who she was always meant to be. The garage on Industrial Avenue sits locked and empty now, the cars sold to collectors who will treasure them as Robert did. But its purpose has been fulfilled. It was never really about the automobiles or their value. It was about transformation, about moving from dependence to independence, from vulnerability to strength, from endings to beginnings. As I prepare for bed in my Mexican house, decorated with love and filled with possibility, I whisper a thank you to Robert, not just for the money or the property or the careful planning, but for seeing me clearly enough to know what I would need to flourish alone and loving me deeply enough to provide it. The woman who inherited a garage has become the woman who inherited herself. And that, I understand now, was always Robert's true intention. What seemed like my husband's final disappointment became his greatest gift of love. And that's how everything changed, from feeling forgotten to discovering I was never more cherished. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe here. There are so many more tales of hope to share.